Hello and welcome to this special edition of our podcast honouring Black History Month. I'm Pammy Baines, Deputy Chief People Officer, to be joined by Jay Dungeni, our Chief Nursing Officer. Jay, thank you so much for being here with us today. We're excited to learn from you, hear your journey, and share this space of reflection and celebration together. As a starting point, can you tell us a little bit about your cultural history and your journey?
Yeah, Pammy, thank you. Thank you for having me here. And it's such an honour to participate in such a significant date in the annual calendar of the NHS and the world, really. So, I hear that question a lot, and happy to oblige. I love the fact that I can be myself in this conversation and say a little bit more about the Jay that people don't see beyond the person that's in front of them. So I'm Zimbabwean by birth, born and raised in Zimbabwe, of South African heritage and naturalized British. And I like saying that because when I speak to my children, it is very clear to them that I've got this rich history, that there's something about social media nowadays. They're so curious about what that involves. And you should be a fly on the wall dinner time in the Dungeni household, because we really explore that in great detail. And I'm hoping that through this conversation and dialogue, you'll be able to take a piece of me and understand what it's like to walk in my shoes and experience the environment that we have here at Ashford and St. Peter's and beyond.
Jay, that's absolutely fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you about that journey. Just thinking about that and thinking about standing firm in power and pride, this year's theme for Black History Month, what does that mean to you when you reflect on kind of your cultural history and your heritage and that very strong bond that you've described?
So many angles that I could kind of step into that and share a piece of me. The one thing that really jumps out at me is what my default personality is, and how that is so different to the person that I am at work. And for many years, I've stepped into this persona at work that just made me feel less authentic when I go into my reflective spaces, because I know there is the Jay at work and then there's the Jay outside of work. And in the more recent years, I've embraced a lot more. And I don't know whether it's the positions of authority that I've held or the inspiration that I've taken from others. I do not shy away from being the person that I am, in that I'm no longer trying to fit into a narrative, but I want to bring myself into whatever I do, discharge my duties, and be human as I interact with other people. And of course, that means that I bring my identity with me as I do that. And I particularly wanted to underscore this bit. Being born in Southern Africa, there is something that's very, very important in the way that we're raised. And there is this dynamic that is emphasized from birth. And even now, I was on my way to work today, conversation with mum and dad in the car on the phone. They still live in Zimbabwe. There is this inherent respect that isn't just the respect of how you curtsy or bow to someone, but how you really hold someone in high regard because they have got life experience. So therefore, every opportunity to interact with someone, and it's not just an age thing, every opportunity that you get to interact with someone, you gain something that makes you a better person. If I could make reference to something that has been mentioned many a time, it's that whole concept of Ubuntu that I've heard people talking about. But if I could just unpack that a bit more in just saying it takes a village to raise a child, there is something about I am because of how others are. So you're taking a piece of everyone each time. And if you put all of that together, you're nearing perfection all of the time, but perfection not in the sense of absence of fault, but you're building and layering on a better version of yourself all the time. And if I could capture that in a phrase, we say, Umuntu ngabantu, which means, basically translates to, I am because of who is around me and who is helping to raise me.
Just hearing that, it is so inspirational. I want to understand, how has that shaped your current role, and what does that look like, Jay? What's been your journey? How has that shaped you and your career? And what does that look like at present?
I'm a middle child of 3 in my family. Looked up to my brother a lot as I was growing up, and I'm the introverted, reserved type in terms of personality types. And my brother, as we were growing up, was, sharp contrast to who I identified as. And that meant that I was always in his shadow. I think I've told this story to a few people, they might recognize this, and that in my formative years in life, very few people outside of the immediate family knew what my name was. I was always referred to as Letu's little brother, and that's quite, significant to someone who's trying to find their space all the way through to puberty and adult life. I battled with that quite a lot because there was something about social construct that said you have to be a certain way in order to make it in life. Now, I broke a lot of those rules. I left home when I just turned 18, flew over to the UK, and culture shock plus. And throughout all of that, there was something about being told all the time, you're too quiet, turn that frown upside down. And to be clear, it wasn't a frown, it was absence of expression, which is very neutral. But I was always told, you've got to smile. And that is different to me, in that, what am I smiling about when I'm experiencing all of these things that make it harder for me to be myself? But unassuming, as many people would see me, head down, quite eclectic history in terms of how I ended up in a nursing career. It worked to my advantage because I could spearhead and achieve what I wanted to achieve and not necessarily be in the spotlight. But the interesting thing for me is the results always speak for themselves. And there is something about someone coming to you and saying, I see you, which is very much the construct of what society is. You wait to be recognized, i.e. where I come from. You wait to be recognized before you can put yourself forward and say, I would like to have a go at that. So those were the big moments in my career, being recognized by other people for what I am capable of bringing into society. So navigating the hierarchies and going all the way up to the highest level in clinical practice as a clinical nurse specialist, and then responding to another call that required me to go into ops management and service management, which I took in my stride and again did it in my own little way. And being able to use my personality type to my advantage, because I was able to bring people along with me. And I consider that my superpower, being able to go to someone and say, we can relate to each other and we can do great things together, rather than being the opposite of what I would see as someone I would never want to be, which is, you will do it my way because that will be the quickest way to a destination. And today, as a chief nurse, I find it easier and easier to do that because I'm able to apply my own style to being part of the senior leadership of an organization. That means that as I do that, I can take people along on a journey to allow them to be themselves and pay more attention to what they bring rather than who they are, without undermining who they are.
And were you always the nursing trajectory? Did you do anything else that kind of shaped your experience and kind of your lived experiences in your journey to becoming a chief nurse?
There's very few things I haven't tried. And I don't know whether that correct tallies or aligns with the personality type that I've described. As I've said, I've gone into ops management, I've done programs management. I had a background in sciences. I was a chemistry buff in school. I absolutely thought I would be a chemical engineer. Something that I did try and do and decided that I wasn't going to do it at that point. I love history. And again, going all the way up to being a divisional director of operations just helps you see the world in a different way. And that's what my journey has been. It's getting to understand how I exist in a society that requires leadership. Because with leadership, there's always followership. And if you end up discharging your duties in a leadership position without the followership that you need, it creates a tension. And at times, it's harder to recover from that tension. It's not always combative in any way, but it's palpable tension. And you can draw a lot of parallels to what's happening in today's world, which I'm sure a lot of people will be experiencing in different ways, whether it's religion, faith, gender-based and identity and the like, which is such an important thing. The one thing that I would say is a highlight in my lived experience is when I took on the role of being an exec director of EDI, I'd always thought that I grew in every role that I did. That was a proper growth spurt for me in my leadership career, because the meaning of intersectionality carries something different in terms of relevance to me rather than what I read about at the time when I just thought, well, there's a definition to that word. And I come to you today as a father, as a brother, black male, happens to be a nurse. I've got disabilities, and not a lot of people would see that, but I do carry disabilities and so many other things, my religion, my faith and the like. But the thing that people will probably notice a lot more is that I present as male, because that's the physical attribute that people will see. But that I'm also, my skin tone also suggests that I identify as black. But it's only when you start having a conversation with me that means very little to me, apart from the fact that when that is challenged, I feel the need to stand up and make sure that the correct version of that is what is portrayed rather than what is perceived. And of course, no one can ever debate what my experience is. You may have a perception and and an impression as to what you think it does to me, but the experience is mine, and that's my story to tell, not anyone else's.
In that journey, in your career, is there a moment that you want to share with the audience about where you felt kind of specifically, or otherwise, your racial or ethnic identity influenced your experience? You talked a little bit about you presenting with your intersectionality as a male and as a black chief nursing officer, and everything that brings you as a person. Is there anything that you want to share, positive or negative?
I'll start a bit with the experience of being inspired. My inspiration comes from people for different identities and different walks of life. But it becomes such a reflective point for me. Chose to work in this organization. Of course, it was a bit more than just me choosing. There was a whole process that I had to go through, and one might call it, we chose each other. And it wasn't until I sat down at the dinner table, and my other half was who loves kind of like sharing a bit about, let's come up with a strap line for this. It's such an achievement. And the concept that there's so many people that look up to me is when she said, you do realize that you're the first black male chief nurse in an acute physical health provider organization in the NHS. Right? Let's just pause so that you can understand why that is such a significant moment for me. My ethnicity comes into this. The way I identify from a gender point of view comes into this. And the other thing that we've got to say is that happened in 2024, but actually started in 2025. 24, 25, let's just call it 24, 25. How old is the NHS today? Let's just think back to Windrush. Think back to the Mary Seacles and so many other people that I can look up to and say, you paved the path for people that may identify or look like me in a world that wasn't quite ready for it. Why, as much as we need to celebrate that, why is it a first so late into the life of the NHS? Right? So profound for me in that I now think about how I carry that responsibility on my shoulders, and it's such a burden, right? But a welcome one, because I have to play my part in changing how people perceive what the journey to achieving such senior positions of influence is, and how open it is for people from all sorts of different walks of life to come in and discharge their duties in the way that they see fit, but in a way that allows the organization to embrace that as well, because it's not just down to one individual, it's a whole systems issue. So as much as I celebrated with friends and family and people in the profession, I still reflect every day as to whether I'm discharging my duties in a way that represents that in a positive way to inspire the very next person. In the previous job that I held, and I still maintain that today, when I move on from this role, what is the likelihood that I'll be replaced by someone that looks like me? And if there was ever a mic drop in a podcast, it's got to be that, because there'll be so many different answers out there.
Jay, it's definitely so profound when you describe that and describe how long the NHS has been in place. Reflect on Windrush and why it's definitely a moment to pause for the organisation and the NHS to say, I think for the organisation, it's definitely a moment that it needs to reflect on and work exceptionally hard to make that a reality going forward. I suppose you talked a little bit about Ubuntu. You talked about respect and that culture of respect every single day. Are there any figures? You talked about your parents, but are there any figures, past or present, that inspire you to stand firm in your own power and pride? Is there anything that you wanted specifically to say about that?
I think there'll be a lot of people in prominent positions in history, Barack Obama's, Nelson Mandela's and the like. If I was to bring it closer to my lived experience, it has got to be every black or brown person that has spoken to me in a way that allowed themselves to be as open as possible about what it really is like to carry that burden and responsibility. I got the most recent person, because there are many, right? My mum will always be up there because she did a lot of things that were deemed not possible or acceptable in her working career. It's got to be my previous chief nurse, actually, Guys and St Thomas's, who was on the King's Honours list, so Avi Bhatia, who's also now recognised as a professor at the King's College London. In that, when she appointed me as her deputy in 2021, there's something that she said to me, and she said, here we are leading in an organisation that would not be used to being led by people that look like us. And therefore, we have got to get it right. And getting it right isn't just pushing our ideas through. It is about working with all of the people that are underrepresented or disproportionately represented in the lower echelons of how we see the hierarchy in the NHS. And that was the start of my new journey. I will spend a lot of time speaking to people, regardless of colour or creed, particularly people that identify as black and brown, to understand what it is like to work in an organization where there isn't inspiration in senior leadership positions for them. And the number of times people have allowed me the opportunity, and this is how I see it, I'm privileged in that they allow me to speak to them rather than they are speaking to me. I'm always amazed at the number of people that say, "Oh, never really spoken to someone in your position before." That is so wrong. That is so wrong. If we're going to lead with purpose, we've got to understand that we're representing a whole lot of people, and that's what, standing firm is to me, that I will always build in some time in my day-to-day work to have a conversation with someone that I've never spoken with, to understand what it's really like to be led by me, amongst others, and what I could do differently, because that is golden, isn't it? So, and the pride that I have in being able to do that means that I'm preparing an NHS that is ready to hand over to the next generation. And I mean generations, I should say, in the plural. Of course, people will know that I've recently been on paternity leave. Everything that I do now, I'm just thinking about what is it that my son will walk into because I have led, because others have led.
Just listening to you, Jay, is such an inspiration. If you were to give advice to Black professionals just starting out in healthcare, what would that be?
I'd never realized in my formative years how difficult it was for people that didn't look like me to speak to me. So if I was to describe both sides of, proverbial divide, is for everyone to try and make it easier for the next person to speak to another. So if I was to take control of that as an experience for me, there were so many opportunities that I had to speak to people in positions of authority or influence for a different outcome. But I didn't. It's a social construct. It might be difficult for people to understand that a lot of the times these doors that appear to be closed, they are open. You just need to go and knock on them or push them, But why should it be up to one person? There's another person in this. They need to seek out those conversations as well. So I'm hoping that I'm describing something that will be a call to action to everyone in their formative or existing roles. Just think about who you speak to all of the time and who are the people that you do not speak to, and just taking a moment to think about how you could make that happen so that there's a new dialogue that leads to something, whatever that might be.
How can we as allies best support Black colleagues, not just during Black History Month, but all year round, to have that transformative impact and have generations of people coming through, rather than having this single, person or single people who have this burden to change what we've already seen?
Yeah, so I've mentioned some of that already, but there's something about, if tomorrow is going to be different, we've got to work on the talent and the potential that we have today. So we've got to disrupt our processes and make sure that it helps us see talent that presents in other ways than what we are used to seeing. So, I could just stop there, and there'll be so many other inspirations that trigger people to notice this. There's one for me that really stays with me for a very long time, and it will be forever in the future, is my mum taking me to watch a film, Cry Freedom. It's about apartheid in South Africa and what allyship meant in terms of supporting people to achieve their ambitions and the like. And if there's anything that I would leave with anyone that's listening, to say, go away. You can find it on so many different platforms nowadays. There'll be clips on YouTube as well. And there are many others out there that are not YouTube. Just go in and see the lessons. It's a litany of lessons throughout the whole film. Cry Freedom, Denzel Washington playing Steve Biko, and you'll get it.
Thank you to you, the listener, for listening to our podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.